When Doctor Who returns in 2010, it won't be with me.
Hello and welcome back to The Who Look. Last week I did a video on why the actors who played Revival era companions had left the show, so I thought today I'd look at why each Doctor actor had left the show. Just to quickly mention, I won't be looking at non-leading Doctors, so the War Doctor and the Fugitive Doctor aren't included as they never actually led the show. William Hartnell started the journey of the Doctor in 1963 and lasted up until 1966, where he left after only 2 stories in season 4. His departure came due to his health declining throughout the course of his time on the show, and by season 3 he was struggling to keep up with the workload on the show. He was starting to become erratic and forgetful with his lines, causing them to have to do reshoots, which in the early days they tried to avoid. The ultimate decision for William Hartnell to leave came from the show's producers, who decided to change the actor to keep the show going, giving us our first regeneration, even though at that point it wasn't called regeneration. Patrick Troughton was the first actor to become a replacement Doctor. He only stuck around for 3 seasons, including season 4, which he came in after a couple of stories to replace Hartnell. There were a few different reasons why he left, from concerns about being typecasted if he stayed, to becoming tired from the schedule of filming the show. Jon Pertwee became the 3rd Doctor in 1970 and stayed for 4 seasons until 1974. Jon was also the first Doctor to have the show aired in colour, and each of his seasons contained almost half the episodes that Troughton's last series had had. He eventually left the show when fellow cast members left the show, as well as Roger Delgado, who betrayed the Master, passed away in a car accident. He also complained about back issues during most of his run as a reason for his departure. Tom Baker then took over the role, and he became the longest Doctor on the show with 7 seasons between 1974 and 1981. When it came to his time to leave, he left due to his relationship on the show. He had fallen out with producer John Nathan Turner, among others. Tom has admitted himself that he's a difficult person to work with, and he clashed with writers and directors as well as co-stars. He's claimed that he's attempted to leave multiple times in previous seasons, but he was always convinced to stay. But his clashes with John finally had the show agree to let Tom leave. He would later return for the 50th anniversary as a future incarnation known as the Curator. Peter Davison's time on the show only lasted for 3 seasons between 1982 and 1984. He took on advice that Patrick Troughton gave to him to only stay for 3 seasons. John Nathan Turner reportedly asked him to consider staying, but Davison refused. He was unhappy with the quality of the scripts he was being given during his time on the show, but he later said that he regretted not staying for a 4th season as he was happy with the scripts in the final year. Colin Baker joined the show with the intention to become the longest serving Doctor, but ends up leaving as one of the shortest of the 6 at the time. He only completed 11 stories in his run across 2 full seasons and 1 story at the end of Davison's final season. The show survived cancellation, but the decision to remove Baker was made to try to improve the show. They asked him to return for a regeneration, but he refused. This led to his successor, Sylvester McCoy, wearing a wig so they could show the regeneration into the 7th Doctor. Speaking of Sylvester McCoy, he was the final actor to play the Doctor during the classic series. The show was put to a side in 1989, with him surviving as the Doctor. The decision to leave ultimately wasn't his on both occasions, as when Doctor Who returned in 1996 for the TV movie, the producers decided they wanted a new actor to take on the role, but they also wanted to get McCoy in for a send-off, which he agreed to do, unlike his predecessor, and the TV movie started with the 7th Doctor. And then we get to Paul McGann, the main Doctor for the TV movie. Like Sylvester McCoy, the decision to leave wasn't exactly his. He starred in the TV movie, and after that, the show wasn't picked back up. It wasn't until 2003 the Revival era was picked up by the BBC after rights issues were dealt with, and it was decided a new Doctor would appear from the very start. This was the first time that regeneration between Doctors wasn't seen. However, in 2013, Paul would return for the mini-special The Night of the Doctor, where he regenerated into John Hurt's War Doctor, who himself would start his regeneration into the 9th Doctor, completing every regeneration once again. When the show came back in 2005, it was Christopher Eccleston who got the role, but as soon as he had the role, he also didn't. He left the show after 1 series, with claims of regeneration was always happening, and counterclaims that Chris quit himself, forcing a regeneration. Whilst we may never know what really happened between Eccleston and the production team, it's just a very sour part of the Revival. Ultimately, he has refused to return to the show since, as he was offered to return for the 50th anniversary, with it being written with him included. However, his reasoning then was he didn't feel like he was right for the 9th Doctor. Eventually, the script replaced him with the newly created War Doctor, set before the 9th Doctor, More recently, he said he would think about returning if Russell, among other producers, was sacked, which only adds on how toxic Series 1 must have been for him. He has seemingly come to some peace with the show at least, as he has since returned to do audio work for the Ninth Doctor. David Tennant joined the cast as a lifelong Doctor Who fan who begged revival showrunner Russell T Davies to give him a role in the show whilst they were doing Casanova together, and offered him the role of the 10th Doctor. After 3 series on the show and a handful of specials as a send-off, he left the show at the same time as the then current production team. He claimed he didn't want to outstay his welcome and decided he needed to leave, or he felt he never would. According to Russell, he almost changed his mind, meeting up with Stephen Moffat to discuss plans for the future, but ultimately he decided to stick with his plans to leave. He would later return for the 50th anniversary to star along his successor. He would then also return again for the 60th anniversary, but as a different incarnation, which we'll get to later. Matt Smith took over the role and lasted 3 seasons as well, making the Raw 3 more common for a Doctor. Like David, he would have happily continued on the show, but he started to feel the workload of playing the Doctor and decided 3 was enough. He did make a cameo in the next series of the show to guide his companion, who was considering leaving his successor, through a phone call that took place at the end of his final episode the year prior. Peter Capaldi was cast as the main Doctor to be the complete opposite of Matt Smith's Doctor. He decided to leave the show after 3 seasons like so many do, due to the workload that the show brings. He also didn't want his relationship with the show to sour like Tom Baker's did. He left alongside his showrunner, which allowed the incoming production team to start fresh. His final episode ended with a multi-Doctor story, with the first Doctor returning, this time played by David Bradley. Jodie Whittaker joined the show as the first female Doctor, alongside new showrunner Chris Chibnall, who both worked together on Chris's previous show, Broadchurch. The two reportedly agreed to start together and leave together, so when Chibnall left after 5 years, who according to one of Chibnall's friends claimed that he only ever had a 5-year plan, Jodie followed him out the door. David Tennant returned for a second spell as the Doctor, as another incarnation this time, although this time was only temporary, as he only signed on for the 3 episodes for the 60th anniversary. In part because he and Catherine both had discussions with Russell about returning, and partially because incoming Doctor Ncuti was busy filming elsewhere. The plan was always to join and then leave after 3 episodes, with David getting a twist the second time round, with a bi-generation, meaning his Doctor is still sitting around having garden lunches with the Noble family. Which finally brings us to Ncuti Gatwa, the current Doctor. He seemingly has no plans to leave at the moment, although rumours about his future are up in the air. I fully expect him to be the Doctor to go beyond the 3 series trend of recent Doctors. The show is filming so far ahead that I feel like he could go off and do the theatre run like he said he wants to do after 2 series, and then come back for his 3rd with little to no delay. It's worth noting that a lot of the actors came back for their roles after their departures from their leading role. For example, the actors from the 5th up to the 8th Doctor all returned to TV as recently as 2022 as manifestations. Other actors have returned in episodes like the 3 Doctors, the 5 Doctors, and the 2 Doctors. And that's all the leading Doctors. Obviously, as I said at the beginning of the video, there are other Doctors or versions of the character with other names, but none of them actually led the show. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Did you know the Doctor's daughter is married to the Doctor, but the Doctor's daughter is the Doctor's wife?